Hi, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, sure. I'm already excited to go through the tour right now, looking at what your studio looks like.
I try to bring in all the plants, so it looks a bit like mysterious somewhere in the back there. Yeah, but I did pull out a lot of stuff today. But then I was like, maybe I'm gonna hurt people's eyes with all these things.
No,
Really
I think
keen
this is
on
what I
converting one
mean,
of these webinars into a real cinema
Okay,
space, you
we
know?
are live. We are live on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
yeah, where we're just, jumping into the thick of the process of the process and the place where it all happens. And I guess this is something that it took me by surprise as well as we developed the project of putting this together. And I would love to see that happen. Actually, it's, how does a cinema experience come to life in the context that we're operating? And it looks like we're going to be operating in it for quite some time. And it's like. A producer. I was listening to a talk by the founder of Bloomhouse that was talking about the possibility of the next decade of a lot of terrible movies about this time that we've all lived, and then finally there'll be a really good one that will really sum it all up. So I'm really looking forward to that experience. And I guess we're live. We are joined by, I can see, about 19 people who are on this call, who we'll hopefully get to see. Join us in this room. Welcome. For those of you who who haven't met me or haven't seen me on the Avenue, my name is BOLLYWOOD. I'm the founder of Cinema Aqil, an art house cinema, an independent art house cinema based in Alserkal Avenue. And it's my privilege and honor and joy to be joined here by, I guess, recently, found connected female voices that I responded to during the most absurd of times in the cinema journey. We had been open for about a year and a half, after which we were forced into lockdown, and that sort of unveiled its own Pandora's box of conversations and discoveries. And here we are, and this is part of that trajectory. And for tonight's film, I was gifted the pleasure of encountering YASHASWINI Raghunandan's documentary while on the journey of the Sharjah Film Platform, which was in its second edition last year, and it was founded by the Sharjah Art Foundation back in December 2019, which was a very critical time, in India. So the film ended up winning the first prize for Best Experimental Feature Documentary, and sadly, YASHASWINI wasn't able to be there to receive the prize. I guess because of all that's going on, and you can tell us maybe, about what was happening in your world at that time. But what you don't know, I guess, is that the fellow members of the jury, which included artist filmmaker Naeem Wyman and Solange Farkas and myself, had written a statement which we weren't able to read during ceremony. So I'm going to share it with you here. And the statement was for its hybrid. Let me pull it up here. For its hybrid of documentary and fiction, poetic liberties with scanned 35mm, folk songs, and the essential labor of the People's Archive of Rural India, the award for Best Experimental Film goes to The Cloud That Cloud Never Left by YASHASWINI Raghunandan. So I guess this is your belated award ceremony. And I know that SURABHI was supposed to pick up the award for you as well, and you were in China. So, somehow all these worlds are colliding.
Thank you so much, BUTHEINA, for like that. I've not heard that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for still accepting it in its second round in its virtual edition. And I would second that award many times over, and I'm really thrilled that I'm able to bring it to a wider audience that perhaps didn't get a chance to see it at the festival at the time. Just a little bit about.
Also organize this for us. So I'm really happy that our film is getting screened at this moment in time, online version as well. Thank you for having our film.
No, thank you. And it's a bit of a bittersweet decision that we had to make to kind of decide to do this virtually. I run an independent cinema at a time where the sort of the war of the streaming wars, and that battlefield has still not settled. And now with with the lockdown and the pandemic and that governing aspects of the industry, I still feel very strongly about the force of bringing people together in the same room and and experiencing, especially a film like yours that is so tactile in its poetry. So hopefully one day we'll get that opportunity. I don't want to take up too much of the conversation because I'm really, selfishly excited to bear witness to this encounter. And when I started working on, the development of this program, which is specific for Alserkal.online, I reached out to SURABHI Sharma, who, has been sort of a new, avid, vivid, and active, friend of Cinema Aqil, despite the unencouraging circumstances that we're working with. I mean, she's in Abu Dhabi, I'm in Dubai, and, we still haven't been able to meet face to face through it all. And, this led to, by some alignment of stars or clouds, that you had worked together, and there was that history that brought, these two worlds, into one room, and here we are. So before I hand over to that, I'll just introduce our conversants for tonight before I resign my role as the interlocutor and leave the floor to you. YASHASWINI Raghunandan is an artist and a filmmaker and has received the postgraduate diploma at the Social Communications Media Department, Sophia in Bombay. She wrote several long and short film scripts before developing a special interest in sound and its narrative potentiality after her graduation at the Royal College of Art in 2015. She is a resident at the Rijksacademie in Amsterdam, and you're now based in Bangalore, I believe.
Yep.
And SURABHI Sharma has been, despite the incredible role that she's been able to bring to the conversation around cinema in the UAE, has been a filmmaker, making feature-length documentaries and short films since 2000. Her documentaries, fiction, and video installations engage with cities in transition using the lens of labor, music, and migration. SURABHI's films have been screened and awarded at international festivals and are included in teaching curricula in universities in North America and India. And I'll be sharing a link to her website, which has an extended filmography and references about SURABHI's work. She's a visiting faculty at the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, Whistling Woods International, Mumbai, Sophia Polytechnic, Mumbai, and the Narayan National Institute of Visual Science and Arts in Kerala, which has conducted intensive workshops on documentary filmmaking at design and film schools in India, and is a mentor for the Documentary Resource Initiative in India. She was awarded the Motion Picture Association, Asia Pacific Screen Awards, Academy Film Fund, Brisbane, for her ongoing documentary film project Music in a Village Named One PB. She has received grants and fellowships from the Ford Foundation, Majlis Cultural Center, the Brit Doc Foundation, and her films have been recognized and awarded at the 8th Asia Pacific Screen Awards in Brisbane, Eco Cinema, and the list goes on. And I can go on and on, but we're lucky to call her a member of the film community here in the United Arab Emirates, being based at NYU Abu Dhabi, and I'm looking forward to this exchange. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, BUTHEINA, and I'm very embarrassed that this very expanded CV of mine is available somewhere on the net. I better find it and scrub it out. But thank you for having us. And as you mentioned, it was pure serendipity when you asked me if I wanted to discuss a film by an Indian filmmaker named YASHASWINI Raghunandan, and I was like, yes, of course, because I love her films and I love her work, and I've known her for a long time. So this is what this strange pandemic time has enabled, I think, conversations across space, but also new and renewed kind of conversations. So with that, on that note, let me sort of begin to engage YASHASWINI, whom I'm going to call Yashu because her name is very long and we all know her as Yashu. So it's going to keep slipping on my tongue if I say YASHASWINI every time. So welcome, Yashu, and I'm delighted to share your film with audiences spread across, actually, we don't know where all. But, what I thought we could do is for half an hour, if you and I could sort of speak, one, about how you came to this film and the people in this film, how did you sort of encounter them and encounter that world? And then I would want you to lead us through your process. And I'm privy to some part of the process, so I'll nudge and urge some questions. And then I thought, after half an hour of you and me talking, and you're sitting in your studio with all your film clips around you, so we are eager to see how you work with the material. But in the latter half, I thought we could ask the audience to join in and really make them engage with you vis-a-vis the film and what they read of the film and the questions that arose for them. Yeah. So let's begin with the first question, which is, how did you come to this world? How did you discover this world of the toy makers? How did you meet them? What was the kind of engagement that you were part of that led you to them? So if you could sort of speak a little about that.
To me, it's always so nice to like find these moments of time when, films are made, and then I can come back and kind of go through these questions with you, because Surabhi has been a mentor for a very long time. And so it's always, I'm also going to treat this as a bit of a private session where I can like get back to the process and kind of refigure how these things worked out. Basically I'd finished my program in London, where I'd spent a lot more time like looking at sound-based practice. I think the previous films that I'd worked on as a part of Behind the Tin Sheets, I always had a problem with like trying to find the language to communicate as to what kind of a sound world that the film needs to carry through. So I think it was on the back of my head, and spent a lot more time in sound-based practice in London. And then when I came back to Bangalore, I think outside a lot of like temples, a lot of hospitals are this very loud sounding. It's actually quite a annoying little sound which rattles the city. I mean, it's a very small but a very elegant and a beautiful looking toy, but it really has one of the things that they carry this toy for is for its sound ability. So I couldn't stop like kind of hearing it after a while in like street corners or outside, temples, outside market areas. So I would just kind of snake through the city and kind of find these toy makers, and they're very what do you say, like it catches your eye in a city, I suppose, because they carry this really long bamboo pole, and it's fixed with a lot of like colorful objects. But this one particular toy, which is called Cat Kitty, it's also named as a sound, like Cat Kitty. It really grabs your attention because it's made out of this like what do you say, an earthen, like mud clay, and then these two metal poles come out of it, piercing out, and like there's a cane with two kind of like fork on top of it, and then the film frame is stuck inside it. And so this goes around the city. And on a close observation, there are two kinds of things that kind of like really grabs your attention, right? One is that if you put this close to your eye, then of course there's something charming about the color of the world changing, and then you recognize actually what's making the sound is a film strip. Now I was like, here's a really like golden opportunity in a way to like look at how history of cinema and history of labor can kind of coincide or coexist in one little object, which suddenly image kind of resurrects itself into a sonic object. And while the sound of the image has been torn apart to fit into the toy. So I would just be their best customers to all the toy sellers. On a lot of conversations, I kind of figured out that they're all from Murshidabad, which is a district in West Bengal. It's the second largest small-scale industry in the whole of Asia, beating a lot of like other districts in Bihar and China as well down. It's also a very poor district. So I mean, one is that it's like yesterday when we were having a small conversation, how you brought up that cottage industry thing. So it's a whole district with about 175 villages where they make fake Colgate, fake close-up, CDs, anything. It's because Murshidabad happens to be close to the Bangladesh border, so there is a flow between objects coming or products coming in from Bangladesh, getting assembled here, then going across the border and then reaching. There is a very weird underground economics that kind of functions this whole thing together. So I kind of spoke to the toy sellers who are in Bangalore, who all live in small motels at the center of the city, and they stay on terraces, which are converted into like kind of a bit of labor colonies where they stack their toys and make their toys and head out into the city. And then I just followed some of them through all the way to Murshidabad. And there were only, by the time I reached there were only about, in one village, which is Daspada, which is where the film was shot, about 3-4 families who cut up reels and reels and reels of film to make these little toys. It's fascinating because the whole village measures its world around 35 millimeter. All objects are, measured around 35 millimeter, whether it's the little whistle or the rattler or what is put inside something, the flexibility of the material. It's about the material, not really about what we imagine it to be as cinemas. So yeah, it's a wonderful place to be in. Yeah.
So when you go to the village and you find that the film strip, in a sense, is being reimagined. I won't use the word recycled. It's being reimagined into a sonic object and an object of play. They are all reworked into toys. So the fact that the film image is no longer of any consequence, you as a filmmaker, when you encounter that, did that sort of set off this journey for you in your own filmmaking about what is the image? Is there any truth to the image? What is the sound of the image? What am I seeing? What am I not seeing? Because I feel all these ideas seem to inform your eventual film quite comprehensively. So I really wanted to delve into that process you went through. And I know that after you went to the village and when you went to Amsterdam for your year-long, for the first year of your fellowship, you carried with you, I don't know, hundreds or a suitcase full of these toys. And you pretty much spent the year dismantling the toy and then reimagining all the material. So if you could sort of talk us through that process, because now suddenly you are very far away from the village and from the people. So any idea that you had of making some kind of an ethnographic or an observational film about that village was, of course, very far from your mind, because now you only had this bits and pieces of material with you. So what prompted that work for that year? What did that process make you see, or make you understand, or make you imagine, or what this film was going to be? If you could talk through that, and if you could even show us some of your bits and pieces.
So, I mean, before I left to Amsterdam, I was 2 years in the village, spending about 2 months, coming back and going in 2 months. I spent enough time in the village to know how the working of this happens, how the economics of this supports the village, or what prompts them to think so innovatively about making this, and how they sustain this whole thing. So I kind of knew quite a bit of the village. So it was, one is, of course, I was their best customer. So I had these bags of these kind of little whistles, which would be of different shapes and sizes, because it's kind of interesting to think about how this is like a plastic object, right? But the size of the film within this would be almost like the size of a capsule, I think I brought this to you in Bombay, really tiny bits of things. So, I thought the best way to use the residency space was as a very big scanner. So I could really be the reverse kind of, I've said this quite a few times as well, but as a reverse toy maker who could kind of dismantle what they make and kind of reconfigure how this cut-ups are happening. Because I was also, in terms of in the practice of documentary filmmaking, I felt like I'm always kind of curious about what are the new questions that one can bring about, or what are the new kind of questions that you can ask or find out. If you've stayed with the community for very long, you have the opportunity to really expand the notions of questions or notions of finding out, which is something that we had learned from 10 Sheets, but I wanted to kind of like break open a bit more of that kind of questions. So one of the top questions that was always on my head is that if you're cutting up so much film, is it possible that the story from the film is leaking out? And then, then there would be a different kind of storytelling or different kind of conversations that the toy makers would start saying. And then you recognize actually, it's not too far away that the making of the object, the answering to the questions can all lead to creating a very surreal or I don't know, kind of a strange object like this. Because if I came with an idea saying that I think I want to identify everything that's rotating in your village, because it seems like not just Capcutty, but everything in the village is rotating. So then I would see these like small plastic cap bottles fixed to like another bamboo thing, kids are playing with it, or even all the boats in the village will rotate, or the way that they try to catch some insects would be rotational. Everything was rotational. So then they'll give me more ideas. So if, like my cinematographer, Paramita and I, if we would go out and be like, I think we want to make the film red. So then they would be like, okay, yeah, here's hibiscus, here's pomegranate, here's. So it's a very different kind of like a community compared to the previous works that we've done with construction workers. Here it's like, yeah, we've kind of discussed all where we come from and the outsider that I am, or what they are, and now we're talking about a complete different language. So this was useful. So when I went to Amsterdam, I went with a bit of confidence, saying that actually now I have real friends, like a bunch of neighborhood friends where I can kind of throw some ideas in, use it a bit of a summer holiday, and then they would participate. And this I thought was like an immense opportunity. So when I went back to Amsterdam, I was also kind of curious about certain kind of questions about expanded cinema. Like for instance, there's a lot of discourse on expanded cinema being, an artist studio, and, films cut up and dipped and, ripped apart and scratched. And then I was like, here I am with a bunch of thousands of these toys and like all of these cut-ups. And actually, it's not an artist studio, but it's an object of work and object for, economic survival. And it suddenly felt like a certain kind of a conversation that can, break open expanded cinema's notions as an artist studio. And then I was thinking also like in terms of like filmmaking. Now there's a film that's made, there's an editor on it, and it's shot like that, and it's edited like that. And because these are positive films, so they're like these, the ones which go out into the theater. So then if there is so there's an editor on this film, and then it goes back to the village, and they've cut it up in different kind of ways. So there's a second level of editor. Then I have my editor, Abro. So I'll be like, hey, look at all this and kind of remake this all over again. So I was like, this whole folding up and padding up of million storytellers on it itself could kind of create that haunting or this endless kind of film material archive and the archaeology of an image which has suddenly become a sound. I don't know. Something was all strange and melancholic as well. I don't know. I felt like it's sad that the image is suddenly now taking on the burden of sound and kind of, leaking into the world or something.
No,
so I mean, yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
No, I mean, it was just kind of easy to land up in Amsterdam and just kind of have that a bit of a studio space like Rijksacademie, and like kind of cave into these images and scan. I'm trying to do a lot of scans at 5000 dpi because these images are small, right? Like because the 35 millimeter, the
perforations
are cut off. So now the scanner on which you scan had to be kind of mounted up. So you had to put two glass frames and then press them down and then scan them in. This takes a lot of time, which was kind of useful in a way. Like, then you're like, wow, these are really beautiful images because it's hiding somewhere behind this pink and hiding somewhere behind this red. And yeah, so.
And to come back to these images that you were scanning at very high resolution, So there was a certain need for clarity, but the clarity with which you were seeing those little frames was really to see the scratches, the damage, the sense of time layered on those images. And, you know, for me, the way you work with those images, the way you work those images into the film, so that you're constantly obscuring our view of the village in a documentary sense, right? So you're constantly bringing in layers and layers of ways in which to make us see, so that everything becomes something that we reassemble in our minds and our experience. But for me, it was also your exploration of your time spent in the village. So rather than represent the time you spent in the village, you took us through that experience of your time spent in the village, is the sense I got with the way the film came about eventually, you know. And there have been a lot of questions that have been asked of you of, you know, so where is the fiction and where is the non-fiction? And did you feel a responsibility towards the non-fiction, and what was your responsibility towards the documentary and the fiction? And I feel like those questions are really quite redundant, because everything has a truth in it, and everything is in a sense recreated and reimagined, and can be reimagined further by all of us, you know, the audience. So there's a way in which, and then you bring it all to the phenomenon of the eclipse, and then the cloud comes in and we can't even see the eclipse. So there's levels and levels of, you know, a word I'm going to borrow from my partner, who, when he saw your film, said, it's all about what do you see when you obscure, not what do you see when you open up. It's what is hiding various layers is what opens up a meaning or an understanding. We are almost close to our half hour, but I was wondering if you might just want to show us, you know, because your way of making the film was almost as if you borrowed the cottage industry, the handmade element of the toy makers, and you pretty much handmade this film. So you know, the technology just plays one small part in the film, but there is an attempt of you to paint over, if I was to use that analogy. So if you can sort of show us a bit of these things that you were constantly creating.
I'm gonna try and do a share screen, because I've kind of pulled out some images for finding out. It's also like
go to the little green thing at the bottom, and then you can, yeah.
So I mean, one of the things that, you know, like what George was saying about obscuring. So the other thing is actually fundamentally, these are like a play. So now, even when you scan them in, I don't know which side it's supposed to be on. For instance, if you, hold on, can I do this one? Like, this is my arrangement to this, actually. So I'm always kind of curious as to when somebody comes in as to how they would reorganize it. First of all, would they do it left to right or not? And then, is this really a character or not? This white thing in the center. Maybe it's a face between her hands, or I don't know. It's like really fun to, yeah. I don't know. I can show you sexy hair man.
I was going to ask, what is sexy hair?
Look, Surabhi.
So some of them have the sound
yeah, you could like kind of retrieve it. We tried to do that. This is sexy hair man. So yeah, these were really fun scanning, and then you'll be like, oh wow, there's something else. You want to see the funny man in the red coat.
I know both your editor and your cinematographer are there in the chat, in the group. So I'm hoping when we open up for questions, actually, how did they respond to, you know, all of this is also a question we could open up.
Yeah, actually, I think the frames have intimidated us quite a bit. So we were like, actually, Abru is really like, tried to help me work this out. Yeah.
But I think all three of you worked really very well in tandem to sort of bring in that idea that, you know, so I made a lot of notes. Let me just try and pull out. So that every person who encounters the material, it's almost their responsibility to retell a story or their story or someone else's story, you know. So that even that point of view can be sort of you can circle round and round. So there is that element that I think first you brought, and then your cinematographer brought, and then of course the editor, and then we aren't even getting into the sound design because it's really unfortunate that people had to watch it on their laptop screens and not hear it on a proper 5.1, you know, because that is where the immersive quality, and that is where sound as a narrative element that takes you somewhere else comes in. But I think, you know, I thought initially I might briefly ask you about your previous project, but I'll just bring it in very, very briefly. So YASHASWINI worked with another collaborator and close friend of hers to sort of make this film, 3 short films in a project called Behind the Tin Sheets, right? Yeah. And within that, there were 3 short films. In fact, I can see that some of the NYU AD students who are here have seen this film in class because I've shown it to them, about the construction workers, the construction workers building the metro in Bangalore city, and that preoccupation with migrant workers in the city and their lives and their both unconscious and their dreams and their fantasies and their ghost stories, in a sense, informed that project of how do you represent the migrant worker in the city who is invisible? How do you make him visible? And I'm saying him quite specifically because it's majority male workers. And that preoccupation with thinking of, you know, labor in the city and migrant workers, ephemeral workers who are constantly erased, that led you to another community altogether. And this time it's in a village. It is looking at work. It is looking at work that will finally find its way back into the city. But, you know, it is work being produced in this kind of cottage industry way. And as you said, the material is cinema, is film, which comes from the city. So it's almost like a cycle, a routine, you know, a journey that goes round and round even over there. And then you enter it with your interest in looking at labor and migration. And then you locate it within this space. You know, another thing that I was hoping would come up in the discussion is the fact that I think your film, while it is really invested in the idea of the documentary, is also a very important critique of the documentary. That showing is not the only way of telling or exploring the truth, that there can be many other ways. So on that note, I think we'll open it up to the audience. I can see there are some questions that have come in. Again, I want to inform all the attendees that both the cinematographer and the editor are there in the audience. So I will wait for a few questions. Otherwise, I could carry on, but I'd really like to. Yeah. So there is Abro is the editor of this very difficult film. Every time I see the film, I end up forgetting both YASHASWINI and Paramita's work, and I keep applauding the editor's work. So he's here, and I think Paramita is here as well. Oh no, she's left, is it? I can't see her anymore. So yeah, I'm waiting for your questions, and it would be nice to hear, or not just questions, any reflections, any thoughts that you might want YASHASWINI or Abro to respond to. And while I wait for the questions,
Ruby is there, Surabhi.
Sorry,
Ruby is there.
Okay, I can't. I could see her name, but now I can't. But she must be there. So let me sort of draw in, you know, Abro into this conversation. And Abro, the question I had for you is that this structure that Yashu has of this idea that she has that every frame is sort of has a possibility of leaking 100 stories into the village, and in reverse 1,000 stories of the village leak into these scratched surfaces of film frames. Now, how do you as an editor deal with so many layers of material? Because for Yashu, the material is really very important. Not just the image or the sound that's going to be projected on the screen. So as an editor, I feel that you brought that element in very beautifully, but I'm wondering what were the difficulties or the conundrums that you were working with while editing? You'll have to unmute yourself, Abro. Come on, you've been on Zoom enough.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's a very difficult question for me because the processes for me is very intuitive, rather overtly conscious. It's not. I mean, as far as these ideas of stories of this film clips leaking into the village and all that, I don't know how much of that I understood. I heard of everything that she told me. She is essentially, I mean, had many things about it, a lot of which purely raw emotion, which I could sense. And there is also a lot of history of her experience, her reading and analysis and everything. I don't think I understood or in the process consciously trying to kind of hold all of this. But what kind of appealed to me emotionally or experience wise, what kind of amazed me or drawn me into the process is that here is a person I know who encountered a toy I used to know a long time back. When I'm from Bengal, so I used this toy as a kid and I revisited it when I was grown up, but I never thought of never thought of the dismantling it. And I also knew that there was a piece of film in it, and I never wondered about it. I mean, but she did all those things and created this in conversation and in our personal encounter, the whole atmosphere of wonderment that, see, this is this film, now they're there, and almost like these films are ghosts and they're looking back into the village, and the kind of presence these films have in the village with a different kind of purpose, with different meaning, if at all. Yeah. So those really kind of excited me. And there is a sense of mystery in it, sense of, again, wonderment. So I was probably all the time when going through all these materials was trying to grasp those. And while editing is certainly, I was editing many options, many possibilities. Some of them were representing what I am feeling and also what she had been thinking. So they were like okay moves. So that's how I think it happened. Yeah.
We still don't have any questions from the audience. You know, if somebody would like to sort of just make comment is also fine. It doesn't have to be a question or a response to anything. Okay, so I'm just going to continue then. So again, to draw Yashu back into the conversation, you know, so the eclipse, you know, the eclipse becomes an important, in a sense, event that the film is leading towards. And the eclipse is, of course, about an idea of rotation, but most prominently, it is about not being able to see, of, you know, something hiding something. And then with the village, you create this giant kind of object in the hope that you will see the eclipse, but you will see it through this kind of a giant version of this little sound toy, right? And then, of course, you have no idea, no way of knowing whether you will be able to see. I remember, again, before going for the shoot, you had called me and said, it's in the middle of the work, like it's the heaviest part of the monsoon. So it is almost 95% chance that there will be rain and there will be clouds and we will never see this. But you were sure that you still wanted to attempt that quote unquote seeing. So, you know, if you could speak a little about that, what, you know, how did that emerge from the way you were thinking about the film, the village, its people?
I mean, also like, I mean, with this process of documentary filmmaking, the other thought that was running in my brain is how many more limitations can one add to a process? So, I mean, the toy itself as an object kind of was reminding me, I mean, was making me think of this Berger's essay about like looking through and looking in. And I think the question of scale was interesting to me. It is a very small object, but how large can we make it? And going back to this, you know, the conversations we've had about tin sheets as well. It's about movement and it's about for work and how ideas change or how nature of your thought or philosophy and things change. So one of the things that the toy makers like very proudly talk about their work, or the way they philosophize about their work, is that this object in my hand rotates for 5 seconds and the earth that we're standing on is rotating, you know, that many kilometers per day. So which means that we're meant to move. The land is for the dead, not the living. So we're meant to move. And that already gave a sense of scale, which gives you an opportunity to think about what is it that I can bring in as an idea to this thing to kind of live that idea or kind of illustrate that idea almost. So I was like, okay, here's an eclipse. It was the longest eclipse of the year. It was on the July 27th. And I was like, long, which meant that I could stay awake in the night in the village for a very long time. And we had your wonderful camera. This whole film is shot with Surbhi's equipment, by the way. And I was like, the limitation of documentary filmmaking, I was like, okay, I'm going to go 1st of July till the 20th of July, no more shooting. So we were like 20 days with 3-4 prompts and 3-4 interventions, which is like these, you know, throw in certain set of ideas, whether it's Chiku and Baban making this like large object, or asking the kids to kind of like get involved with us, and then Kakoli Didi, whom we stay with, and then all of it will merge together on this eclipse day. So, I mean, if the eclipse happened, we would have a very different film. There's a chance in it. And if it didn't happen, this is the film that we have. So, I mean, yeah, it was actually Paramita, my cinematographer, who woke up. I mean, we never slept. And then the morning when we went out to shoot in the morning, she was like, the cloud hadn't left. So she's like, that cloud never left. And I was like, yeah, that's it. So we stopped shooting and that cloud stayed on for like some 3 days after that. So I was like, okay, here's the ending of that. Yeah. I kind of like these limitations without like trying to do too much of how many more limitations can push either the cinematographer or the editor or me into a vortex, and this is it's good.
Yeah, yeah.
Try it.
So there's a question I'm going to read out for you. When Abro brings a new and also intuitive perspective into the editing process, I wonder, what does Yashu think? What was that collaboration like? Does it bring a new lens, or is it intuitively connected to what you feel the film is? I'm infatuated by the process. The filming, researching, and editing all seem very strongly process driven. In this light, up to what point, from what signs in the post-production do you feel that, yeah, the film process is concluded?
So with Abro and me, I mean, I think we do have quite a few, quite a few heady arguments and things. But also I come with very limited footage. So he has to work with that kind of economy. I mean, I think when Paramita and I went to shoot, I was quite sure that these four strands that we would follow. So there's a certain sort of a dailiness to the village. So every day, Baban and Chiku will go out and construct this thing. So there's a lot of footage around that. Or then there are these televisions which kind of bring alive like the happy ghost or the happy monster of these films coming back into this world, which we will shoot every day. So there's this daily pattern, which in itself sets a pattern. Now, Abro has this very mindful way of kind of looking at the three different stories that we had and kind of weaving a pattern. So sometimes I'm really expecting or hoping that he will help me find those things. And there are things that he doesn't want to choose because he'll be like, that should have been done differently. We had a murder sequence with the children, and then I really wanted that in. And he was like, no, it's not concluding somewhere. So he will remove that. But it's such a dialogue, and Abro and I have worked with all the like 3 films of Tin Sheets, and now, see, each time I kind of actually, now it's almost like when I go back, I know what he's going to tell me or what he's going to try and work with it. So there is a beautiful partnership on that and some sort of unsaid chemistry with both Paramita and Abro. Like, I think many times they know what is the world that I come with, and then there's this thing about, oh God, do we have to deal with this, or how do we make this happen, and things like that. But yeah, there's a lot of love-hate in that. Yeah, do you want to say something about that, Abro?
I actually want to sort of just come in and Abro prompt you on that, because there's a way in which Abro has edited this film which is very different from his other work, which I've been luckily privy to over the years. But there is a way in which he's able to mirror this idea of your process, because there is no sequence that is allowed to begin or complete. So there is a way in which he is moving from sequence to sequence without allowing any either resolution or any one singular understanding that you can take away. So it sort of builds on that sort of, an experience that is very, at one level with a lot of affect, but it also allows you to really get immersed in that space. And as I said, the space is not about revealing the space. It is about sort of feeling the rhythm of that space. And I feel Abro's editing did that, which was completely in sync with the way your mind was working vis-a-vis your material.
No, I want to add to that, because I mean, I've seen him do this. Like, he will start off, he'll start off like kind of making the opening or something, and I'll be like, oh no, we can go to this material now and we can, kind of finish this. Or he'll be like, no, we'll come back to that. There's this thing about, let's come back to that. And there's this waiting within that thing. He actually kind of already knows, like, he's got his, ways of coming back to those moments and kind of marking it out. So I'm for me also in the process, I'm holding on to that suspense, because I know that we have that material where it will come together and it has to finish there. But he's got this way of, bringing it there, but also postponing it and then creating, because we had, with this particular film, we had this kind of a climax or an anti-climax with the eclipse. So we kind of knew that we would arrive at various points. I mean, this thing would get constructed, Kakoli Didi's phone calls would get attended. So there's this various points, but he knows how to kind of like take all of them with that ease or extend it in a very lyrical way, almost very musical. It's quite fantastic to see that work happen.
I'm just going to interject and introduce Paramita Dhar, who's the cinematographer of the film, who is also on our panel now. So welcome, Paramita. We are going to come to you with some questions. But before that, there's another question from Nada Raza, which is around abstraction and the sort of painterly visuals of the old film that become a way of listening to the landscape of Murshidabad. Reminded me of a Mola Sagar film about the river, but that relied so much on the camera. Here it is interesting to think about this more as a composition, allowing us to wander around with you a bit. To lead from what Surabhi said about documentary, once the scans were done, how did you come to this process of working with image and sound in these sequences?
I think, I mean, in terms of like for the village, I mean, I think we took the motion of the object more within the cinematographic language, which, you know, the boat is turning or the eclipse is the only, I mean, I felt like allowed us to think about every sequence, which is more rotational, but, you know, the eclipse happens to be a standing line, you know, where the sun, moon, and the earth is one line. Or, you know, the camera is rotating and the kids are running in a particular way, or the toy gets made in a particular way. So the object kind of like gave the camera, I mean, I think this time Rupi had to like really like very worried about your camera, because she was like mounting it on a like a really thin tripod and rotating it. She would run behind something. It was upside down many times. I mean, we really tried to toy with it mindfully, but I mean, do that. But with the images in itself, I think it's kind of intimidate, at least for me, it intimidated me for a very long time. I think even when Abro came in to edit the thing, I was like, they're so starkly, I don't know, somehow finite in what's happened to it as scratches or leaks. I'm still not sure as to how to bring them in and how to get them involved. So, I mean, there was a lot of these frames that were scanned in and we'd made a lot of like edits or whatever. Then he kind of slipped them in, because we'd also kind of installed these frames inside the televisions, and we had taken a little Pico camera and you know, kind of projected it onto the village. So it was more about the physical presence of that image in itself. Now, the later part of the image is kind of like blurring the thing is just something that's happened, and I'm glad that they're in conversation. For a very long time, I felt like, I know that they make this, but they're still kind of quite apart. So, I mean, we could bring certain, I mean, physicality of like installing things within the village, but I mean, it still never felt together until like we fixed it. And yeah.
No, but this would be a good point. Nada's question would be a good point to bring Paramita in. And Paramita, you know, I was just wondering this. You would have seen these scans, right? Before you went to shoot, you were very aware of all this material. And so, and I know that the circular movement was again something you had discussed before that, but one of the things, again, something that that we were discussing before the discussion began, was this idea of how you were constantly seeking the darkness in the village. So again, not to reveal, but to seek a seeing in the darkness. And then you have all these, you know, whatever high resolution scans of only scratches and textures. So when you went there, when you went to the space, how were you responding to what you were seeing and how you wanted to use the camera? And thank you for taking care of the camera. You used it before I used it for my film, so I'm very privileged in that sense.
Hi, everyone. So, I mean, I think I'll just respond to the fact that when I arrived at the village, one of the things, after spending few days, the first few days, I think 1 or 2 days, we said we will not bring out the camera. Let's just observe what's happening. And I think what surprised me the most of, because I shoot for different people and I've been to different parts. In this case, especially in Murshidabad, in this village, making this film about this toy and its people, was that the play, the participation of the entire village to this process that we were going through was incredible. And I felt like, because they were toy makers, I think there was some aspect of that they were really open to participating, and they almost got us some, because I would think they would think we are mad to come that far and bring all this equipment, build these big things, but nothing surprised them. They were equally participatory, and they were all, it was almost like, yeah, that's what we do. We take things, different materials, and make something out of it. It almost felt like they could, it was like partners in crime in some way. That was one of the things that stood out for me as a cinematographer in this shoot, and the people of this village. And I think even Yashu just said that we both were, I mean, in all our conversations before these images we were not very sure how they would really leak into the final film while shooting it. But I think in terms of the darkness part that you were talking about, we had actually there was most of the sequences we had imagined were in the night, were in low light, and we did not want to, obviously we went to a very, very remote village, so we did not want to bring our own lights. So we worked with what was available, and we knew that would be very low lighting, and that's also why we chose the camera we chose, and also because you had it. So yeah, I think it was all working with what was available, but a lot of things were discussed, and like all the sequences that Yashu had mentioned before. And honestly, for me, it was a lot of fun, and it was something that I had not done before also. So I think all three of us were toying around with something that we were not very comfortable with or aware of, because a lot of my camera work before were on tripods. Here it was just like on the hand. There was also the worst season to shoot over there. So all of that play, but at last, I think it was, yeah, exciting.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, but I'm wondering, the people who have not spoken as yet, if there's any comment, any question that you might want to pick up, it would be nice. Or either Nada or Sabrina, if you want to pick up from what you have already asked and add to it. I feel a bit embarrassed sort of hogging the show and asking all my questions over and over again. But then the lovely thing about this film is that it's been what, almost 6 months, more than 6 months of asking you questions about this film at different platforms, and I still have new questions. Sorry, Paramita, you were saying something?
Yeah, I think I just, one more thing I wanted to add is also, when you stop giving names, like when we began shooting this, we didn't name it. We were doing a work of fiction or non-fiction. We were going to create and immerse and there was this object and this village, and something's going to come out of it. So I think when you stop calling it a particular thing or B particular thing, it kind of then liberates you to do certain things that it's not restrictive. Then we could create put things in the village, and I think that also allowed a lot of space when we didn't say, oh, we're making a documentary film, or we didn't speak about the form in that way, in one way or the other.
So actually that brings me to a question that I had decided to ask, that slipped my mind entirely, was that, when for a year Yashu was in her studio in Amsterdam with all this absolutely gorgeous, luscious material that could have become a trip in itself. My question to all of you is, why was it necessary to take that material back to the village and make a film together in the village? That going back to the village was, I think, very critical for all of you. If you could sort of speak a little to that, and then perhaps we could, if there are no more questions, we could sort of wind up. Yashu?
Subi, I built a relationship with these people, and I don't I mean, I think it's very difficult for me to like kind of separate the object and the world around it. I think, me me, you know, kind of parasiting onto that object or then onto the village. I think I think the wonderment of all of it, it's a word that actually Abru gave it to me during editing, but the wonderment of all of it was just fascinating, and it was great because I mean, like Ruby was saying, like in this toy making community is very open to ideas or inventions or like trying to make these things. So while the journey seems quite like, you know, distant from Bangalore to this Murshidabad, but the object or my relationship with them and how we make it will all seem very naturally going into the journey. Okay, here's a toy, I love it, who's trying to think of it? Then you go there and then you're like, oh wow, they're wonderful like ways of looking at how film can be brought back into the world as, you know, as a sounding object, and then here's scanning them and become. So I just think it's kind of whirlpooling into the village, the world and the toy and you. And I mean, I can't separate them in my thinking.
Yeah. No, but that's again to come back to, you know, I kept feeling that the time spent with the material and the time spent with the village and the community, that is what really informs, or that is what gives the lens to see all these disparate elements. So, you know, that sense of that I'm seeing time unfold, an experience unfold, that is, I think, what was central to what I took away from the film. I think we should, Nada has said, lovely cat, Paromita, by the way. And listening to you guys makes her want to make a film, which is great. We look forward to that, Nada. BUTHEINA, if you could come in, because BUTHEINA also has a question, and then perhaps we can wind down.
So this is part of the absurdity of this Zoom format is, you know, we haven't met, and here I am, I walk into this room, and, you know, I'm just thrilled you were able to join us. Paramita, Abru, thank you for being part of the conversation. I mean, we could go on for another, you know, hour, like every, you know, conversation that Surabhi was very lucky, hopefully not the last time, you know, and hopefully at the cinema itself. Nada did have one more question before I jump onto mine, about whether you went back to the village and screened the film, whether you showed it to the village.
No. So I was just telling Surabhi this yesterday. So I came back from Amsterdam in February or something, and I was supposed to go at this moment. So the lockdowns have stopped me from going there, but the unfortunate truth of the time is there's no more toy making going on. The pandemic has really shifted the economic possibility of this, and there's the whole, I mean, Chiku, who's my closest friend, I mean, my friend from the village who constructs that large thing, 250 of them were flown down into Bangalore to do infrastructure work. So, I mean, I've been meeting them in Bangalore right now. So it's a very different moment, but I definitely, I mean, just it's a wonderful village. So I mean, I'm definitely going to go back there. It's also not a great time for me to go back there because I mean, the health infrastructure is a bit, I mean, it's not in place and I can't go there. But it's otherwise the plan was it's a Durga Puja time in October, November. So we would have gone there and made a mela and like really had a great time. It would have been fantastic, but I can't wait to go back. I mean, the next good moment I think will be back there. But no, I haven't shown them, but I have made various kind of clips and sent it through WhatsApp. It's kind of floating around in a WhatsApp group in Murshidabad, and I don't know, other kinds of lives are led by these sequences there. So
I just want to give a little context to what Yashu just said. So basically after the lockdown, there was exodus of the working class from the cities because there was just no food to eat. So cities emptied out. Because they wanted to kickstart the economy back, they've gone to Murshidabad, where, of course, because of the pandemic, the entire cottage industry that exists over there has completely broken down. And so in that desperation, they have flown 250 workers to take the place of all the workers who left to go to the village. So it's a kind of a crazy world that we are living in. But yeah, So it is, I think it's communities that like this whose the pandemic and this very crazy lockdown in India has really broken the backs of the economy of such a large group of people that it's crazy.
In a way, I mean, you also with this film somehow documented an era that's no longer, right? Like you didn't even expect the extinction to be this swift, or do you think that there'll be a different sort of lifespan for this process and that community and that type of work?
Always like not. I mean, I don't think one can be finite about what could this moment propel. I mean, we didn't know that the film can be kind of, you know, got back into the world like this object, so we don't know what's going to come about. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there is a crisis right now, so one is kind of trying to make sense of it, and yeah.
I mean, I would like to conclude on a more bird's eye, view of where the film sits in the context of the sort of the crassness of the industry itself. And this is something that, I just came out of a 2-hour, session talking about, a selection process and, festival circuits and that sort of distribution and sales and, and the VOD kind of landscape. And in that context, I mean, your film premiered, in Rotterdam, and then it screened at several festivals, including in Mumbai, and then, came here to Sharjah and other festivals. What was that process like for you? I mean, you as a filmmaker, but also, for Paramita, for Abro, for the team that worked on it, like, was that sort of the thinking, in the back of your mind as you were making the film? Is it something that you would, have done away with? And how do you see the film living now that, that sort of period has sort of been in some shape, way, or form redefined? I mean, some festivals are back on track, and we just had Toronto Film Festival and some semblance of normality in that, but nothing is the same, right? Like, I mean, this is something from the perspective of an exhibitor. It's completely shifted the way that we're thinking about programming. So I would love to hear from you how you're thinking about your role as a filmmaker, if at all.
Somehow, I'm kind of, actually, for myself, not my crew, but for myself, I've not been a very industrious or clever about my processes of kind of going out and making. I'll just make a way to make them happen. It's important for me to go out and do it. So the film itself has a different kind of a meaning, whether it's in the festival or not. I'm glad that it is in a festival. I mean, I didn't expect that to happen, and it's all by coincidences that these things have worked out for me. But I think the good side for me is that since I've never learned that, I can continue to keep doing what I'm doing, which is great. The second thing is going to be harder. It's always going to be harder. Yeah.
Abro, do you have anything to say about that? I mean, the sort of the process, at least even of seeing your film, on screen, seeing it in the sort of the festival environment and that kind of engagement with the film, and then being able to talk to it is, it is a different, part of the journey, right, of a film. And whether it matters even to see it, you see it as you see it, and that's the school of thought of, yes, like make it available on multi-screens and let it travel in different ways. And in some way, your film has already done that, right? It's already traveled in fragments, on WhatsApp videos and other forms, right? Does that matter? Does it matter to you to see your work in that forum, or is it just important to make the film and have it find its way in sort of in the world?
Abro,
Mute.
You're on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if I understood the question right. The way these films were being screened in festivals and post-pandemic, how it's being circulated, and what I think about it. It's that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, but not so much even about pandemic, right? Like this is even a question before that. What was sort of the expected I guess what was the experience for you as a team, to kind of come together around that aha moment of presenting the film to an audience? And does it matter to show your film to an audience in that way, or is it important that it just gets to as many audiences as possible in whichever shape that takes?
I think the genesis of this particular film, I mean, was because it has so much of materiality and the smallness of it. I think the scale really mattered, in the sense like that we were in a theater with a 5.1 mattered, because it was like, I think the scale of how small but how large it can be. I mean, the 5.1 of this really mattered to us at some level. I mean, the toy would rotate and you could give that sensorial, I think that commitment to watching it like that, I mean, really gives you a sense of, yeah, I'm far away. And I think that for this particular film, I think we could woo people to come into that quite a lot more easily into the object in itself, or into the toy in itself. So that was, of course, that was fantastic. Now, at this particular moment, I mean, I really feel bad about not having 5.1. I mean, that's one thing that I really feel about.
Here, there is two different side of the situation. One is, of course, the way the film is edited, sound designed, or conceived is, as we said, there is no sequence which really kind of concludes. I mean, it's not about a narrative conclusion. It's about an atmosphere, about the world, being there or experiencing it. So essentially, a big screen, a good sound system, and a lot of people being together and experiencing something is very important. I mean, all entire effort has gone into creating that atmosphere of being into that place, into that world. So certainly that that got kind of affected by this kind of this situation. But at the same time, what's happening is, it's very curious. I mean, for example, the kind of film we most generally do, since they don't find their way in mainstream platforms. I mean, many of my close friends, relatives, neighbors don't know what I do. They know that I'm an editor. So, and they don't go to these festivals, and majorly these films travel, and there is no access to those screenings for general film viewing audience. Now that these links are up in Facebook and places like that, so I share. So people who know me, they click and they watch. So I'm kind of, it's being shared more. I mean, in my personal circuit. I mean, so I'm being able to see a various breed of reactions. I mean, these are the people who never saw films like this.
Yeah.
So people who go to a documentary film festival or experimental film festival, they have a kind of background, or they have a preparation to go walk into a situation like that. And this is like something being thrown onto them, and what they're saying, how they're reacting to it. It's quite curious. For example, one interesting thing is, some of my poet friends, I mean, they're not into watching what we call poetic films. Although when we do something, we think we are doing something poetic with film, within film, we're certainly drawing a lot of things from the literary ideas of poetry. But then again, the poets who are in literature not always able to understand the poetry in the film. The same kind of obscurity they encounter in film, just because they are not habituated to that language, they don't understand it, and they get put off. I mean, you're not telling me anything. then you can say that when you wrote that poetry, you didn't tell me anything. That sort of thing. I mean, it's quite funny. I mean,
Yeah.
Thank you. Paramita, did you want to add to that, your experience?
I think I agree to it. I remember when I watched, I mean, there are a lot of my films that I shoot, I never get to see them big screen because I never end up at the festival or whatever. But I watched at Mami, at Mumbai, I watched this film and we were all together, the whole crew. I really felt like it felt like a closure for a project, you know, that as a cinematographer, for me, suddenly I was like, it does something to you to be physically there, to really listen to that sound the way you're supposed to. So that experience, I think this was the first time the whole crew made it together to watch it on a big screen. And it was, I will not take away the fact that it was extremely special and it felt like the whole project is now, I can see what it was meant to be. And it's fair to ask for that when you work on it. And to see it on a big screen. And I think what Abro said is exactly, I mean, since this happened, a lot of the films I shot are online and I have not had it, no one has ever watched it before in my family. And there's been like suddenly, people I expected would not like this film are actually responding. And maybe because they just never had time, access, and now suddenly it's all over them and people are taking time out to see, hey, what does this girl actually do? Let me try to see. So yeah, that's exactly. So it's exciting at the same time, but yes, cinemas, will be missed. It will be back, hopefully.
Well, I'm glad this has been a period of discovery, and I guess for me, this is the closure that I need tonight. You know, from the perspective of somebody that bets on the collective experience of sharing film and being in the presence of film and those that make them. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this, for doing the work that you do, and I really hope more of your friends and family, you know, are able to see the breadth of what you bring to the world. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for joining us. Yashu, it's been a real pleasure again coming back with this film, and I feel like
thank you.
Thank you. And Surabhi, I mean, you know, we'll be seeing you hopefully somewhere across the border. If not, you know, we'll continue to do this until things settle down. But thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having us. And as soon as the Abu Dhabi, Dubai borders open, I want to come to Cinema Akil. So I'll see you there then. And thank you guys. Thank you, Yashu, Abru, and Paro. It's a lovely time to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to Alserkal. So thank you, Rania. Thank you, Sophie. And thank you, Bestin.
Thank you, everybody, for watching our film.